Hello everyone and welcome to What's New in Wagtail. As Tom said, it's brilliant to see lots of people returning to this webinar and also great to see some new names joining us today as well, which is excellent. For those of you that haven't been to What's New in Wagtail before, I'm Lisa and I'm Head of Marketing at Torchbox, and you are in for a treat today because we've got some great demos and talks lined up for you. So we have Tom, Thibaut, Matthew, Jacob and Tidiane are all giving you updates and demos of features that are included in the latest Wagtail 3.0 release. We also have Sage joining us today for the webinar all the way from Jakarta. So it's already gone 11 o'clock for him, so we're really pleased that he can be here. And he's going to give you a demo on supercharged snippets. And we're also joined by Koen from 4 Digits, and he is going to be giving us an update on our participation in the Google Summer of Code program and also Wagtail.space, which is happening in the Netherlands in June. So we are, as always, a webinar, so you can see us, but we can't see you. But we'd love it to be interactive. So if you've got a question, if you can use the Q&A facility, it really helps us to keep on top of those. But if you just want to make comments or chat or give feedback, then use the chat facility as well, because we'd love to hear from you. I am recording the webinar so that I can send it to you afterwards as well. And I think that's about it for housekeeping stuff. So I am going to pass over to Tom Dyson.
Thanks, Lisa, and hello, everybody. As Lisa said, the first part of this webinar, the main part, is going to be talking about some of the new features in Wagtail 3.0, which many of you will know was released just a few days ago. But before I hand over to my colleagues to talk about some of those details, I want to point out about two of the things which are going to be, I think, obvious to all of you, not just developers. And the first one is the big number change. So we've gone from 2 to 3. And as a little bit of history, 1.0 came out in 2015, and then 2018 was the first 2 release. So it's been over 4 years since we've been on the 2.x release. You can work that out quite quickly because the version before the last was 2.16, and we are very regular with our releases. We always do 4 releases every year. So 16 divided by 4 gives you 4 years. But this number change also represents something which is our switch to semantic versioning. This is a concept that some of you may be familiar with. In summary, we're still going to be putting out a release every 3 months, but when those releases add a feature that either makes a significant visual change to the editor interface or which breaks backward compatibility, we're going to increment the big number, so like the 2 to this 3, to indicate this. This doesn't mean that we're going to be making more breaking changes. It just means that we'll do a better job of signaling them. So in the past, maybe 3 or 4 of the releases in the 2.x would have counted as big number releases using our new system. Since the next version will include some, so we're on 3 now, but the next version, one coming up, since that's also going to include some significant improvements to how we model page data, we're going to be in the slightly strange position that we'll jump from 2 to 4 in 6 months. But as Matthew put it when he made the case for this change, embracing that oddness is part of the deal of adopting semantic versioning. It also aligns us better with how Django releases are numbered, so it should feel familiar to most people in the community. I really recommend reading the discussion about this decision because I think it's a great example of how changes like this are considered and debated in the community. And I'll share a link in the chat in a minute, and I'm sure Lisa will share it in the post-show notes too. The second thing that you'll be aware of with this release, both in the demos that you're going to see now and maybe when you upgrade your sites or if you've upgraded them already, are colors and fonts. And I think maybe some of you may feel a pang of sorrow about the reduction of Wagtail's familiar teal, but I'm also confident that you'll soon feel happy with the modern, fresh indigo that we're largely replacing teal with. In the same way, you might miss Wagtail's distinctive fonts on first glance, but I think the performance and consistency of our new system font approach is a definite improvement in legibility and user experience. We're going to hear more about this in Thibaut's overview in a minute, but I just wanted to emphasize that the design overhaul is a work in progress. we didn't want to hold back improvements in this release, but you'll see the complete picture in August when we release 4.0. Great. So now we have 5 short sessions on some of the headline changes in 3.0, some for developers, some for editors. We're going to pause after each section to give you a chance to ask questions, or please use the Q&A feature at any time. With that, I'm happy to hand over to Thibaut.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Thibaut. I'll switch over to a screen share right away. And I think it's worth starting by, as Tom just mentioned, this is very much a transitory release for us. So quite a big release in a lot of respects. And at the same time, it's also going to be followed by a release that will be even bigger. So we're very much looking for feedback on how you find the whole of the Wagtail UI in this version, and also generally how you see this page editor evolving in the next release as well. So today I'm going to introduce a few of the visual changes in this release, which is again a bit of an intermediary step for us, and also the practical accessibility improvements we deliver to Wagtail in this release, and which we intend to deliver in Wagtail's future releases. For people who might have been here in our last What's Next in Wagtail back in November, I have introduced Wagtail's accessibility statement on our website, where we formally state which standards we aim for, how we actually ensure Wagtail is accessible. So I just want to share this again for context, people who might not have been there, and also as a reminder of which standards we actually target, which is WCAG 2.1 at the AA level, as well as ATAG at the AA level as well. You might not have heard of ATAG before. It's very relevant to us as a CMS because ATAG is concerned both with the accessibility of the editing interface for users of the CMS and of the sites you create with the CMS. So today we'll hear a bit about both aspects of accessibility with Wagtail. And again, I think it's useful for us to start with an intro of the visual changes. So here I just have Wagtail 2.16 as a visual reference, should we need to look back at it. Obviously, you have heard about some of the changes from Tom already. I'll jump straight ahead to Wagtail 3.0 now. And we can see it's definitely visually very different. I want to point your attention towards the sidebar. In some ways, it's very similar. In other ways, it's much, much neater, has a much more refined visual footprint on the page, particularly in this, what we call slim mode, where you can choose to have a much smaller footprint with the same navigation features to the side. The header areas of the pages have changed as well. And if I move now over to the page editor, that's where really the biggest changes are to be seen currently. So again, just for the benefit of people being able to compare what we've done over time, I'll switch back over to 2.16 for a brief moment with the exact same page content displayed in both cases. So I have my bakery demo sites and I'm looking at the home pages editing UI now. And I'll switch back over to Wagtail 3.0. And I can clearly see that the heading area is much more refined, has a much smaller footprint. The tabs are different as well, but the main page editing UI still is using the Wagtail 2.0 styles. And that's definitely something we are hoping to get to in the next release. I'll be able to share a bit more about this towards the end of my presentation. So now over to accessibility, I want to highlight some of the specific improvements we've made. And what's really cool about those improvements, in my opinion, is that you don't actually have to be someone who uses a screen reader to benefit from them. That's often something people might find intriguing with accessibility improvements, or do they actually apply for me, or is it just for people who have those types of needs? In this case, the improvements we've brought to Wagtail are all about better keyboard support. So I'll give you a few demos of this now. I'll move my keyboard focus inside the page, and I can now see this skip to main content link. I was there before. I can now move my focus by tabbing through the main menu. That was also there in the last release. No particular changes there. It works exactly like you'd expect, which we are very happy about. Honestly, it's great to be getting to those inconsistencies over time and making sure people can navigate through those things as efficiently as possible. The big change is if I now move over to the main area of the page, I'll have my breadcrumb component. And you can see compared to Wagtail 2.16, the breadcrumb component has been condensed. So at first sight, it might seem harder to navigate, but again, with the keyboard, I can focus on this toggle area and then quite naturally expand the whole breadcrumb and then tab my way through each of the items. If I now move over to this Actions button, I can again trigger it to display the drop-down underneath. This actually was there in 2.16 as well, just with a different visual style, but I thought it would be very relevant to highlight nonetheless, because this new drop-down style is one we intend to deliver throughout the whole of the CMS eventually. Right now, it's only applied inside the page editor, but in future releases, it will be everywhere on all of the tooltips we have everywhere in the CMS. And behind the scenes, this component is one we've done quite a bit of research on to make sure that the contents of the tooltips and of the actual dropdown can be accessed no matter how you use the CMS. So you might notice here, before I opened this dropdown, there was an Actions tooltip. As a screen reader user, this will become the label of that button. And as a keyboard user, as well as a screen reader user, I can move inside the tooltip and go through the items. And I can close that tooltip with the ESC key, just like I would expect. Moving over to the right area of this header, we now have something we've introduced in this release called side panels. So I'll open this very first status side panel, and I now have this area to the right of the page that essentially brings the same information as you might have had in the header in the past, as well as the information you might have had on the settings tab. So in Wagtail 3.0, we are again in this intermediary step where we still retain this settings tab, as well as this status side panel. Eventually, we're hoping for the settings tab to be much less relevant, essentially only be there if your specific site has a use for it, and otherwise, type of information we used to have on there will be in this status side panel. And again, I'm all about anything and everything accessibility. So what I'm really happy with is the keyboard support for this. So I can quite naturally tab my way through this, again, still see the contents of all of the tooltips and move over to this side panel. And again, tab my way through that very naturally. And for screen reader users, we've taken great care so that each and every one of those sections has proper semantic structure, so you can navigate to each of them right away should you need to. And in a similar theme, I think it's interesting for us to consider what we're delivering in the next release, which definitely is a bit of a step up. So I'm now looking at a design file in Figma, not something we've actually built yet. If I compare it back to the version of the CMS we're looking at in my browser, you can see that the form styles have changed. And you can see this new component to the right, which we call the minimap currently. So this is what I'd like us to focus on a bit more, again, from the perspective of accessibility. What's really cool here is this type of minimap feature allows us to move to any part of the page very quickly with the keyboard. Once I've moved my focus to this area, I'll be able to quickly go to any of the sections of my form. I'm sure lots of people here will have worked with very long sites, very long pages now and then. I've heard the example of contract pages on sites managed by YouGov, which you might have heard of before as a regular sponsor of Wagtail features. Or for example, a page where you might have different tabs visible to end users. And obviously in the CMS, all of those tabs need to be there all in the same form. So this is where this type of feature shines, regardless of whether you're a keyboard user or not. Being able to move to a specific area of the page makes the whole editing experience much smoother. And again, as a screen reader user, I can kind of see that as a semantic table of contents for the whole of my page, and I can move to any one of these. And a nice additional feature I want to mention due to this new component is that if I hover over those heading areas here, I can see that each of those field panels will be something I can link to, which again will be invaluable, so you don't have to tab your way through the whole of the page every time you want to go to a specific field. And I thought the best way to end this would be to look at the other side of the ATAG standard that I mentioned earlier, which is about the CMS and also the sites you build with Wagtail. We recently done quite a bit of work on benchmarking the accessibility of Wagtail websites. You might have heard of this project called the HTTP Archives Web Almanac, where they do a survey of all of the websites on the web. And in particular, one of the things they look at is how the sites compare based on which CMS they are built with. And right now I'm looking at their audit results for the accessibility scores they've been able to calculate on average based on which CMSs the sites are built with. So with this type of data, I can see that Wagtail has a score of 84 with this lighthouse testing across all of the sites built with Wagtail they could detect. And we're very happy to have those numbers to start with, because it makes it very easy for us to compare ourselves, to benchmark ourselves against the competition, as well as year to year, how are we tracking and what are we building that helps drive this type of number forward. And again, this is just an average figure. There is no reason for us Wagtail sites not to be able to go straight to the top, have a perfect score. And for us as a CMS, the goal is definitely that we should be able to be the top one on this list, like we are with some of the other metrics. And a practical way we want to make this happen, which we might have talked about in the past, is bringing accessibility testing inside of the CMS as a built-in feature of the CMS. This is a core aspect of conforming with the A tag standard. So right now we're looking at integrating a specific plugin called Sally, which you might have seen in the past. It's this type of widget that you'll have inside the page preview of the CMS, and will be there to show you accessibility issues with your content as part of the page editing and publishing experience. So this is very much, again, just with the minimap, something we're hoping to bring in Wagtail 4.0. And hopefully I get to demo that at the next What's Happening in Wagtail. Again, very much looking forward to feedback on any and all of this and questions.
Thank you very much, Thibaut. We do have a couple of questions coming in, and lots of nice positive feedback on the new look. The questions are not specific to accessibility, but I'll just raise them here broadly. Strother Scott has asked, when it's time to upgrade, will you be able to upgrade 2.x to 4.x, or will it be recommended to go to 3 before 4? And I think Matthew is probably well placed to answer that.
Yeah, so we would recommend upgrading the one version at a time. I think one fairly notable change where that's relevant is switching Streamfield to use the Django native JSON field, and because that's a change that needs to happen on your own app in its own migrations, then there's a new parameter of use JSON field equals true, and that's kind of being sort of rolled out over the next release or two, and I think that will go smoother if you've got if you are spending a step on version 3 before moving over to 4. As far as deploying to live to production, it should still be possible to go straight from 2 to 4, but I think it's always good to, when you are upgrading, to do it a step at a time to make sure you've accounted for all of the breaking changes like that.
And Thibaut, maybe there's a point here about UI customizations that people might need to take into account.
Yes, this is definitely one of the releases where we delivered the most on the UI side in particular, and where we've changed quite a lot of things that were unnecessarily documented, but people were definitely using. So we've done quite a bit of work in this release to audit the Wagtail projects we have access to, both Torchbox's client projects, as well as the packages we see out there, and make sure they are largely compatible. Obviously, this isn't always possible, but in the cases where this isn't possible, we've also been reaching out to people. Yeah, I'm hoping that this will largely be smooth sailing for people who don't have customizations, and for those who do, we'll have quite clear guidance regardless of whether this is customization of something that's supported or not. So hopefully we'll make it very smooth.
Thanks, Thibaut. There's also a question from Abdul Majid, who asks, will Wagtail 3 be able to support most of the older Wagtail packages? Matthew, maybe one for you again.
Yeah, so it's always a bit hard to sort of make any promises in the case of third-party packages, but yeah, as Thibaut has said, we've done a bit of an audit of these major ones we're aware of to flag up any issues, and I think there's quite a few of them have already been updated for Wagtail 3, but yeah, it does depend on the individual package. So it's worth looking out for an updated version at the point that you upgrade to Wagtail 3.
Thanks, Matthew. And one more from our friend Loic. Hey, Loic, would links to fields be available for Streamfield blocks or only model fields?
Good to have you here, Loic. Good to see your name. That's an excellent question. I believe currently, if I share the designs again, just for visual reference, we were only planning to do this to model fields, so essentially the different areas you'd have within the page. I believe the only reason for this is just the user experience of this. If we were to make links to all of the blocks, it might become slightly clunky if there are too many blocks on the page. There's no technical consideration why that couldn't be done. So if you do believe it would be very worthwhile to link to specific blocks, that would be excellent feedback for us to hear more about that use case.
Thanks, Thibaut. I think we're going to have to move on. If you have more questions about anything we've covered so far, please keep them coming in. We'll try and fit them in. We'll answer as we talk. But next, I'm going to hand over to Matthew, who's going to talk about field panels.
Okay, yeah. So panel definitions have been the thing that powers the page editing forms right from the start of Wagtail's development. So here I'm showing the Old Faithful bakery demo site. So we can see the editing interface for the homepage here, and the corresponding panel definition where things are all sort of split into these subsections with multi-field panel, and we've got various different panel types, things like the image chooser, and this system came about as a way to handle functionality that isn't a native part of Django's form framework, like the image choosers and inline panels, that kind of thing. And because of that remit of doing the things Django forms can't do natively, and that's not really a very well-defined one, they've never been formally documented. And that's both a good and a bad thing. It's good because it means we've had the freedom to adapt them as new requirements have come up for things like adding custom form validation. But on the other hand, it means that they've become a sort of destination for ad hoc fix-ups, both within Wagtail itself and unofficially in outside code. And as a result, we've slightly lost sight of how people are using and customizing them and how they interact with the Django form framework, which makes it difficult for us to do the more intelligent things we'd like to do with the editing interface, which would be things like being able to duplicate inline panels in the same way that we have the ability to duplicate Streamfield blocks, which those of you who are around for previous presentations may remember is something that we introduced the telepath framework to deal with. But introducing that sort of change is a lot trickier when we're sort of dealing with this more free-for-all the treatment of form fields in general. And one of these eventual sort of wish list items here is auto-saving of this, which means that we would have to be able to take the data from this page and to push that to the server in the background. So for this release, we've formalized the rules around what order things get initialized in and what point you have access to the form class, that kind of thing. And we've written that up in this API documentation. And indeed, one psychologically important part of that perhaps is that we're now consistently referring to these objects as panels. Previously, the terminology was a mix of panels and edit handlers, and that clarity around that naming reflects the fact that we now have this more rigorous idea of what these objects are doing. Now, this does mean that if you have a site that's heavily customized in its use of panels, there could be a bit of a learning curve in upgrading to 3.0. As always, we've tried to cover this in the release notes, but in this case, the instructions here are a little bit more open-ended than they would usually be, because we can't totally anticipate what kind of customizations people will have in place already. So it's a bit tricky to say you just need to change this bit of code to that. But for the majority of sites that are just using the built-in panel types, this should be a very positive experience, because we've introduced a number of nice developer experience improvements along the way. And one of them is that the various different special purpose field panel types, like image chooser panel and Streamfield panel, they've been phased out. So we can now use field panel for all of these. This tended to be a common gotcha. If you forgot to use the like page chooser panel and just use field panel instead, you might find that things aren't rendering quite as expected. But now these are all picked up automatically. So if we go back to the editing interface here, and if I refresh this, you should now see that it's still as it was before. It's automatically picking up the appropriate chooser types and the Streamfield. So yeah, it's one less thing to have to keep in mind as you're developing these. And another nice addition that's come in along the way is the ability to designate certain fields as only editable by users with specific permissions. So here we're looking at the home page, which has obviously various very prominent pieces of content that you might not necessarily want an ordinary editor to have access to. So if I log in this incognito window as just an editor user, and you see that initially this is all available for this user to edit, but we can add in an option to say permission. Let's make sure I'm spelling that right. And this would take any permission code name that's defined at the Django level, but we can take a bit of a shortcut and say super user, which isn't really a defined name, but we're relying on the fact that a super user can automatically has any permission, so this will always return true. Whereas since that's unrecognized as a permission name, it won't be the case for an ordinary editor user. So with that change in place, we can now refresh that, and you can see that's now not available for this user to edit. But as a super user, I can still access that and change that to something else, and then that will let me make those changes just as before. So yeah, it's a couple of features here that will sort of improve the lives of editors and make things a bit easier for developers too.
Thank you very much, Matthew. There are a couple of questions on this, but I think because we're running, it's a little bit tight schedule, I'm going to ask Matthew to write a reply to those questions. And for now, move on to the next item, which is splitting streams. And Jacob's going to take over.
Hi, everyone. So as you're probably all aware, Streamfield is one of Wagtail's most popular features, but that doesn't mean we've stopped improving the user experience. In particular, in past versions of Wagtail, one issue has been around editing your stream fields when you've got really large, rich text blocks. Let's take this one as an example. So it's multi-paragraphs, and at this point in our editing process, maybe we decide we want to split this up. We want maybe we want to split it across the stream field entirely. Maybe we just want to add a new block in the middle that isn't supported inside rich text. For example, a block quote. So previously, and particularly in long stream fields, that was a bit of a long-winded process before. we'd start by adding the new rich text block. We'd go and we would go and cut our text, and we paste it down here. And only then could we add in this new block. Let's say the block quote we kind of really wanted to add before to kind of break up the monotony of all that text. Obviously, that's quite a few steps, and we'd like to make that easier. And that's one of the features we've introduced in Wagtail 3. So you may have seen in a Wagtail talk, Wagtail.space talk last year, the NYPR, New York Public Radio, gave a really exciting demo of a proof of concept they've got for something they call their Streamfield splitter, which let you break up rich text blocks into multiple blocks. We've been inspired by that to re-implement that in Wagtail core itself, on top of a new kind of more generic framework for how Streamfield blocks and how their widgets can interact with the Streamfield as a whole. So here you can see we've got this new scissors icon, and this represents the new Streamfield splitter. Let's say we pick this as our point to split. So we simply pick it, we hit the Streamfield splitter icon, and you'll see the block splits in two, and it also accommodates all these other Wagtail features like comments. So for example, you can see the comment here attached to shelf life. That's maybe nitpicking a little, gets moved down to the second block. And we can simply, as cutting down a 4-step process, we can simply add our new block quote in the middle here. So this is the start of a kind of more generic framework. We're hoping to use it for more editor experience enhancing features in the future. Things like allowing us to move the caret from the end of one Streamfield block to another, which requires a widget to have knowledge both of itself and what other Streamfield blocks around it can do. We also haven't stopped on improving this feature either. At the moment, you split and then you add in that extra block. We'd like to make this a 1-step process. So in Wagtail 4, we're interested in doing it simply by picking to split and selecting the block as a single step, cutting this down for large Streamfields and much more. So yeah, this will be available in Wagtail 3, and hopefully it will be an improvement to your editor's experience. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat or otherwise, depending on how we're doing the time.
Thanks, Jacob. I think it's going to be in the chat because we need to keep moving, but I know a lot of people are very happy to see the splitter make it into Wagtail. Next up, we've got Matthew back on module reorganization.
Okay, so one of the biggest but less immediately obvious changes in 3.0 is the reorganization of the code base. And as with the panels, this is addressing a decision that was made way back in the early days of Wagtail's development. Because when we were defining the modules that make up Wagtail, it seemed logical to distinguish between the core code, the page models, field definitions, the things that you would typically work with when you're building up your site data model, versus the admin-related code. But as time has gone on, we found more and more exceptions, things that straddle that boundary. And that would be things like Streamfield blocks, which are part of the data model, but they also implement the editing interface. And also the more peripheral parts of Wagtail, like images and documents. Those are apps that handle both the data model and the admin interface for that object, and we see that as a standard pattern for building Wagtail extensions. So something like Wagtail Media would spring to mind as something that follows that pattern, and those sorts of add-on developments are things we're keen to see a lot more of. And that has meant that the central part of Wagtail, managing the actual pages, has turned into a bit of an outlier for people digging into the Wagtail code base. And that's something that we're keen to improve on. Obviously, we're very keen to see more people getting on board, developing on Wagtail itself, especially with initiatives like Google Summer of Code. And with that in mind, Carl, one of our core developers, has written up this RFC document proposing how we can reorganize the core modules to clarify things. And not all of the proposals outlined here have made it into 3.0, but the version bump has given us the opportunity to deal with some of these long-standing issues. And the significant one to note in the case of the 3.0 release is that the Wagtail.core module is now just Wagtail. So what this means for your project code is that where you previously had imports like from wagtail.core.models, that will just become from wagtail.models. So again, just a bit less typing and yeah, a bit less less to think about there. And now that you might think that that might be sort of a fair bit of typing, of changes to go through a code base, but we've provided this command, Wagtail update module paths, which you can run at the root of your project code base, and that will take care of updating all of these imports automatically. And yeah, the feedback we've had from people trying out the release candidates is that this process has gone very smoothly. It's taken care of everything, so it's been a very very smooth process. So yeah, hopefully that will make things better both for the developers working on Wagtail itself and simplify things a bit for the developers of sites too.
Thanks, Matthew. Certainly, in my experience, I was a bit nervous about updating the 3 little personal sites that I run on Wagtail outside all the Torchbox ones, but I found that using that command made it very easy for me. So thank you for doing all that work and making it easy. Okay, last up in our section on what's new in Wagtail 3, I'm very happy to introduce Tidiane.
Hello. So I'm Tidiane, developer at Torchbox. I will just share my screen. So yes, I'm going to do a quick demo of the image deduplicator feature we have added in Wagtail 3. The feature has been sponsored by Motley Fool, but first I may, why do we want that feature? So yeah, we imagine that maybe if you can have like multiple images. Yes, you can have multiple images, and then it will be hard to keep track of which image have been added or which haven't been added yet. And that's why, so sometimes when you want to upload a new image, you don't know if it's already there, or sometimes, for example, the image has not very good tags, so it may be bad labeled and searching won't help to find it. And all this reason may lead someone to upload an image that is already a duplicate. So yes, the goal is whenever that happens, we want to show a confirmation step to the user so that they confirm that they do want to upload the duplicate. And yes, why would we want to avoid having multiple duplicates is maybe, yeah, we will use more disk space and potentially we'll use more money. And yes, and overall we think that, yeah, not having duplicate might, enhance the editor experience. So yeah, so the way it works, for example, here, if I add, this is the original image, if I can say so. So here we can see that the upload was successful. We can edit the title, then tags and all. So yes, I will keep it. And now what I'm going to do is that I will upload, this is an exact duplicate of the image I've just uploaded. So what will happen is that, yeah, I will have a message like this, like your upload was successful. However, it seems to be a duplicate of an existing one. And here is our duplicate. And here is the existing one. So you will have prompted to either keep the new image if you think that, yeah, for whatever reason you want to keep the duplicate, or you can also delete the new image. So if I wanted to keep the new image, I will, yeah, go in this step where I can edit the title, add new tags, and set the collection and all. So this feature is also available in like in rich text, not even rich text, in pages in general, like in the image chooser model. So for example, here we could, if we wanted to maybe change this image, and then yeah, we'll need to we upload the another one, duplicate 2, for example, and then here too we will have a message saying us that this is a duplicate and we might want to change it, or yeah, just keep the new one. So yeah, here we can use the new image which is this one, duplicate two, or use the existing image, which is the first I've uploaded. So yeah, in this case, if I want to use the existing one and delete the new one. So this feature also work in rich text when you add an image in rich text, for example. So yes, I think that's it. If you have any question, I will be happy to answer them. And thanks again to the Motley Fool for sponsoring this.
Thanks, Didier. I just got time, I think, just to ask one question that's come through from Jesse. Jesse asks, if I upload the same image but in a different resolution, will it still be detected as a duplicate?
Oh, yes. So yes, currently we are only detecting exact duplicates. So if the image has been, yes, resized or blurred or any tiny change we won't detect this as a duplicate. And the reason why is that currently how we detect duplicate is that we take we hash the content of the image and we save it like in a file hash attribute. And then what we do is that we'll compare two images. If they have the same file hash, then they are duplicates. But the thing is, currently we are using cryptographic hash functions, which means that if two images have just a little difference, the hash value will be very different. So yeah, the idea that we are working on a package we are working on it, and we hope to release it soon, which will use perceptual hashing to find near duplicates. So the idea of perceptual hashing is that when two images are, they have small differences, the hash value will have small differences too. And then it will be easier to find if this is an exact duplicate or near duplicate. So the short answer is no, but we are working on a third-party package to add that feature.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Didier.
Thank you.
All right, so that wraps up our section on what's available in Wagtail 3.0, which has just come out, and hopefully you will start playing with, or maybe you're playing with already. And just for the remainder of this webinar, we want to talk a little bit about what's coming. And to start with, I'm very pleased to introduce to you Sage. Sage is, I think this is the first time that Sage is presented in What's New in Wagtail. Sage, for those of you who are in the Django community, his name may be familiar. Sage was a Google Summer of Code student in 2019, where he contributed to quite a really significant feature to the Django ecosystem, to JSON fields supported across all supported databases. And we're really happy that Sage is now working full-time on Wagtail, and he's going to talk to us about snippets.
So as a CMS, Wagtail gives you so many useful features in the page editing experience. Features like revisions that let you see the complete history of a page, and you can go back to a previous revision and also compare the differences between revisions. You also have drafts, so if your page is not ready to be published, you can still create and edit the page as a draft. You can also preview any changes that you've made to the page without having to, actually save the page. There are also workflows that let you moderate pages before they go live. These are all very useful features, and they are essential to a CMS. But CMS or content management system, it's not just about pages. A page may consist of small bits of information or content that could be managed individually. So Wagtail also allows you to manage smaller pieces of content, or also known as snippets. With snippets, you can create, edit, and delete objects of any Django model through the Wagtail admin interface. And if you have pages or other models that reference the snippet, you can choose the snippet when editing that page or model. These are the features available for snippets. But why stop there? Wagtail has many useful features in the admin as part of the page editor, but these features, they do not necessarily have to be tied to pages. And so we are supercharging snippets. We want to bring features from the page editor into snippets, features like revisions, drafts, previews, and workflows. We have broken down the work into stages, and I'm going to talk about each one. So the first stage before bringing those new features is that we want to allow you to customize the views for your snippets. Up until now, all snippets must use the exact same create, list, edit, and delete views that are automatically provided by Wagtail. But what if you want to have some, for example, some custom logic when managing your snippets? In this stage, you will be able to have custom views in the Wagtail Wagtail admin for each snippet. Then in stage 2, we will add revisions to snippets. This means that instead of just showing you like the actions performed on a snippet, the history view can now show you the actual revision of the snippet at that point in time. So you can revert back to a previous revision and also compare the differences between revisions. Next, we will add draft state to snippets. This allows you to save a draft of snippet and publish it. So if you want to create a snippet, but maybe it's not quite ready yet, you can save it as a draft. This prevents other editors from using the snippet in their page or other model until the snippet is actually ready to be published. This also means that you can have scheduled publishing for snippets. But at this point, we don't add any sort of moderation yet. And then we will add previews to snippets. Up until now, you always have to include snippets in a page in order to see how they are rendered. In this stage, we will allow you to define a template that Wagtail can use to preview a snippet on its own. And finally, we will introduce workflows to snippets. This will allow you to moderate snippets, the snippet drafts before they are published, just like workflows for pages. And yeah, that's it for the slides. But before I go, let me show you a sneak peek of what supercharged snippets look like. Let me just go to this tab where I have the bakery demo ready. I'm currently viewing the bread ingredient snippet, and I'm going to create a new snippet object. For example, I'm going to name this salt, and I'm just going to make a few edits. And if I look at the history for this snippet, we now have these new buttons that let you review the previous revisions. For example, if I want to review the very first revision of this snippet, I can click on this button, review this version. And it will show you that I'm viewing a previous revision. And I can replace the current revision with this previous revision. And it says that it has been replaced with a previous version. And if I look at the history, it says that I reverted to a previous revision. And I can also compare between revisions. For example, I want to compare this revision with the current version, for example. And it says that it can show you each change that has been made to the model. So in this example, it changes the name from Himalayan salt to just salt. And you can also compare with a revision with a previous one, like this one, for example. And yeah, this is just the beginning of more things to come. So stay tuned.
Thank you very much, Sage. There's lots of excitement and questions about this, which I think we're going to have to answer as we continue. Interesting question from Simon Cam, who says, what will this mean for the future of model admin? Which is it's a key question, and one that we felt we didn't have quite time to cover this time, but maybe we can just discuss a little bit in the chat now. I just wanted to say before I move on that some of you may remember us presenting Wagtail's vision, either I think maybe the last What's New Wagtail or the one before that, and where we outlined 5 key areas that we want to focus on. And the work that Sage has been doing, along with our other contributors, and which is shown here, addresses 2 of the key sections in that vision, which are the Wagtail as a platform. So kind of thinking about how Wagtail can be used to underpin kind of wider sections of your content ecosystem, and also multi-channel experiences. I won't go more into it now, but I'm really happy that we are that this work is delivering on some of those plans. Finally, I'm going to hand over to Koen, who's going to talk to us about Google Summer of Code and Wagtail.space.
Yes, hello. I hope I'm audible. My name is Koen and I work at 4Digits and in the Netherlands. And I'm a Wagtail core team member. I'm also a Google Summer of Code mentor and I'm organizer of Wagtail.space. I'll start with an invitation to Wagtail.space and then continue on the topic Google Summer of Code. So Wagtail.space is a conference from 15th till 17th of June, and people from all over the world come to the Netherlands to work on Wagtail. And on the 17th, we will have talks and they will be live broadcasted. So you're invited to the event to watch the live video or attend in person. Wagtail.space/2022 is the URL. And with that out of the way, let's move to Google Summer of Code. Google Summer of Code is a global program focused on bringing more people into open source software development. People can work with an open source organization on a 10-week project, and participants get a stipend from Google, and they receive guidance from an open source project mentor, like myself. Google Summer of Code is a big event, and to prove that, here are last year's numbers. There are 1,300 participants, 1,800 mentors, 200 organizations, and almost all projects were a success. So last year, Wagtail participated too, and we had great results. We had a new search backend created by Aldan, and a lot of us use that on a day-to-day basis. Wagtail Live is created by Tidian, he's on the call with us today, and bulk actions by Sohan. And well, this is also a feature that we wanted really long in Wagtail and is very valuable. So so these contributions are great, and these contributors still work with Wagtail. This year we decided also to enter the Google Summer of Code program, and we selected 4 project IDs. The first one is the toolkit for Streamfield migrations. Whenever a Streamfield definition changes, like a block is added or modified, you also want to update the content. And this toolkit will help developers with that to help with that transition. Another project is Windows High Contrast. You can put your Windows machine into a high contrast mode, and Wagtail will follow along and also will display the Wagtail admin interface in high contrast. The editor's guide is a separate website. This is an idea because the current editor's guide for the Wagtail admin interface is in the technical documentation. So editors and managers need to go to the technical documentation, and that's less than ideal. So we are creating a separate website to target them. And the last one is applying the new page editor styling to Wagtail. We saw the page editor changes, and these changes are not in the whole of Wagtail, and with this project we are aiming to do that. So we received 18 proposals, and every project idea is covered with a couple of good proposals. And I'd like to thank everybody who submitted a proposal, because it's a lot of work. And yeah, obviously we have only 4 projects and we can't accept all 20. So thank you to everybody who submitted a proposal for your work and time. And yeah, we really enjoyed working with you to get them. So next up, the dates, May 20th, that's the day after tomorrow. Google will announce the slots, and June 13th, we will kick off the projects and start coding. So Google Summer of Code is an exciting time for the contributors and mentors. Google Summer of Code will strengthen the Wagtail community, and it will bring more talent to develop in Wagtail. 2 of last year's participants are still working almost full time on Wagtail now. And it's very satisfying to help a participant realize a really big project. Google Summer of Code also brings a lot of value to Wagtail, the project, but also to all the Wagtail end users. So it's going to be a great summer.